So we are thrilled today to have Maureen Curran-Dorsano, who is a retired French immersion teacher from Edina Public Schools, and Diane Tedick, who is a professor in second language education at the University of Minnesota, presenting for us today. They have been collaborating for several years on the dual language and immersion family education project that they're going to be talking about today. And the title of their talk is Educating, Engaging, and Empowering DLI Parents and Families, Materials and Resources for Families and Parent Educators. So welcome, Maureen and Dee.
Thank you so much. We are delighted to be here, and I'm Diane Tedick, Dee Tedick, and Maureen has served as the coordinator of this project, the Dual Language and Immersion Parent and Family Education Project that's part of a grant. I'm going to start us off by sort of giving a little bit of background to the project and talking a little bit about the grant that funded this. And then Maureen is going to discuss the bulk of it. And then at the end, I'll pick up again and we'll go visit the website where the materials are available. So thanks for being here. We appreciate it. First, I just want to start out by saying that parent or family engagement is really absolutely crucial in terms of influencing student achievement in schools. So we really have to figure out ways to help parents learn about how to support their children in whatever program they happen to be in and how to be more engaged in the school community. And engagement with minority families in particular, which of course populate our dual language and immersion programs, is perceived as a really powerful way to make schools more equitable, more culturally responsive, and collaborative. And that comes from Edward Olivos, who happened to be the external advisor for us on this project. Educators working in well-implemented DLI or dual language and immersion programs ensure that families are informed and engaged and that they're really able to play an integral role in their children's education. However, programs need really well-developed materials to educate families and to ensure, and in so doing, to ensure their ability to play key roles in their children's learning. So to that end, we partnered with Minnesota school districts to develop an immersion and dual language family education program that was specifically for two-way immersion programs. That was because of the source of the grant funding, which was the U.S. Department of Education National Professional Development Program through the Office of English Language Acquisition. So we had to target our programs to school programs that serve students that are learning English as a second language. And nevertheless, the materials have been developed in such a way that will make them modifiable. You can actually adapt them for other contexts. And I should mention that I'm involved in a project now where we're actually modifying these materials for Indigenous revitalization immersion programs. We're working with the Anchorage School District to do that. So they will be available in probably well over a year for Indigenous programs to take advantage of as well. I'll also say that we developed materials for both K-5 families and also grades 6 through 12. But given the limited time that we have today, we're only going to focus on the K-5 context. So our mission for this project and for the workshops that we developed for parents and families was to enrich the educational experience of DLI learners by engaging, educating, and empowering families. It's incredibly important for families to be engaged in their children's education, and being engaged really means giving it your full attention, right? Being in, being all in. And so the idea is for everybody in the partnership, the students and the teachers and the parents and school administrators to have this school community and everybody really being in and being engaged in children's education. It's also important for families to be educated. They need to understand what these programs are about and how best to support their children in these programs. And then it's really critical for families to become empowered because when they're empowered, they feel stronger and more confident. And especially when it comes to supporting their children's education and asserting their children's educational rights. So we really see education as being a first step and an important first step to help parents become informed and really help them understand how best to support their children. And then once they are more informed, they're going to become more engaged in the school community. And then that education and engagement really leads to empowerment. This is a list of our many contributors, and there were even more contributors because we had facilitators that were identified by each school district to actually deliver the workshops to parents, and we got a lot of feedback from them as well. But as you see, we have a lot of people. Tara Fortune, who used to be the Director of Immersion Projects through CARLA, started off being the coordinator for this project. And she began by identifying partner school district representatives and really beginning the process of developing the content of the materials that would be used in these workshops for parents. After the first year of the grant funding, Tara was unable to continue her involvement, and we were so lucky to bring Maureen on board. So I was absolutely thrilled when Maureen said yes to our invitation to become the new coordinator. And she really just jumped in and took the bull by the horns, so to speak. Really was able to take a lot of the ideas that had been developed by district representatives and put them into manageable size, and also to develop some really great interactive activities for parents as well. So Maureen is really the one who's responsible for getting the materials in the shape that they're in, and really coming up with some wonderful activities for parents to engage in during the workshops. This is just the districts that participated in this project with us. The one that isn't a district is Risen Christ Catholic School, but it's a very Latino, heavy, if you will, two-way immersion program in the Twin Cities. And then we have two-way immersion programs in the other districts that are listed here as well. It's really important to make materials accessible to the people that are going to be taking advantage of these workshops. Because we have two-way programs in the Twin Cities in both Spanish and Hmong, we ended up working with translators to translate all of the materials. So not only the PowerPoints that Maureen is going to be introducing you to, but any of the extra activities, scripts for the facilitators, handouts, and so on. And this gives you an example of the recruitment materials that were developed to inform parents of the availability of these workshops and to get them involved. It's also really important, especially with, we found, especially with our Hmong and Latino families, it was very important to make sure that we're respecting the cultural norms of family members. So making sure that we're reaching out and making more personal connections to recruit them to the workshops. They needed more frequent telephone reminders and email reminders, et cetera, in their many busy lives to come to the workshops. These workshops were designed to be offered in the evenings at school sites. And we offered, because we had grant funding to support this, and the schools also kicked in additional funds, we were able to offer light dinners for families and childcare, and in some cases, transportation for families to be able to get to the workshops. So that was really great. But really the key was doing some really broad recruitment and having materials translated into several languages to facilitate that. Okay, Maureen, I'm going to turn this over to you.
All right, thank you. So our dual language and immersion family education workshops were delivered over 4 two-hour sessions, and each session focused on one of these 4 topics. Today we have 1 hour, and so we're presenting only the most important takeaways from each of the topics and just a glimpse of some of the activities that we use. but you will find all the details about the workshops and access to all of the materials on the CARLA website, and we'll be showing you that at the very end of the presentation. So don't get too disappointed if this train seems to be going really fast. You will have a chance to look at things in more detail later on. So one of the challenges, let's see, what should I do? Just give you a little reminder here. I've got a pop-up screen I have to get rid of. So our first workshop is on the dual language and immersion basics. And one of the challenges in developing these materials was to make the pretty heavy academic content more accessible to parents, especially parents for whom English is not their home language, but even parents for whom it is their home language. It can be daunting, both the depth of the content and just the sheer amount of information. So we really tried to simplify our language as much as we could. So when we show this slide, for example, academic achievement, bilingualism and biliteracy, and cultural competence, which we call the ABCs, and that's an easy way for people to remember those goals. We explain that academic achievement has to do with how well students are doing in school. Bilingualism means speaking 2 languages to a high degree. Biliteracy means reading and writing in 2 languages. And cultural competence is all about how culture, our own culture and other cultures, how that affects the way we think and act. And of course, as much as we tried to simplify, there's still a lot for parents and families to grasp. So we tried to use a lot of interactive activities, both to reinforce the information and also just to make it a little lighter experience, because it's a pretty daunting cognitive load if this information is brand new. And so we use what we call table talk, a lot of table discussions, interactive activities, games, and through all of that, we also get a chance to see how well parents are able to understand the information that we're giving. So interspersed throughout the 4 sessions, we have these discussion points that we call bumps in the road. And we tell parents up front that the road to bilingualism is a bumpy one, and that there will be bumps along the way, but we reassure parents that because of attending these workshops, for example, they are going to be able to meet some of those challenges as they arise. So for example, one of the very common bumps is standardized tests. And so we get parents would show them this bump in the road, give them a minute to talk at their table, to think about what might be a way to handle that. Maybe some parents are going through that right now. And then after a minute or so, because we really have to keep these sessions going, we show them what we have created as a possible response. And this includes both tips and more often than not, just a reassurance that these things are normal and that parents can deal with them, and they shouldn't freak out over some of these things as they arise. The most important thing, and we talk about this from session 1 all the way through session 4, is that achieving language proficiency and academic success, the 2 of those are closely linked, and they both demand a long-term commitment. And so we show this graph which is surprising to our families and somewhat counterintuitive for many of them. Because if you see the green line at the very top, let me go back. This graph represents the trajectory of English language acquisition in a variety of contexts. And the green one at the very top is the two-way DLI context. And parents can see that the longer students are able to stay with the program, the more proficient they are both in, well, they will be proficient both in Spanish, but this is especially for English. And that does surprise families because so many of them think that the more English and the sooner the kids are in English, the better. And this is one study that clearly shows that maintaining their Spanish or whatever your minority language is in the end going to lead to greater proficiency in English as well. So this is a really important piece of information for parents, encouraging them to stay with the program despite all those bumps in the road that they might run into, despite their own fears that their kids are in second, third grade and they're still not reading where they should. We just keep emphasizing how important it is for the long haul. And the results are really quite astonishing. And Dee, I don't know if you want to say anything more about that?
No, I don't think so. Thank you, Maureen. I think you've summed that up really well. And that's really the focus of our first session. It's about really helping them to understand what this program model is about and really homing in on academic achievement as well.
And as you're seeing things like whatever we're presenting here, we have a very nice bibliography, and you can look up more of these articles and you'll see more research that really does, all of the information is heavily researched and supported. So if you're interested in reading that research, you'll find the link on our in the materials. So the second session then, the first session was on academic achievement. So the ABC, the second session is on bilingualism and biliteracy. And this particular session, as we developed it, it really is through each of these activities that parents were able to build their information rather than our presenting it and then having games and activities to reinforce it. They are really co-constructors in this session of the content information. So in this session, we talked about the stages of language acquisition, social and academic language, each of which has activity bumps in the road we already talked about. Some extended conversation about what do we mean by being a super parent? Thinking about that superhero idea. How can we be super parents for our DLI students? And then the dual iceberg activity, which we'll show in just a moment. So we begin session 2 with our first of 2 objectives or goals. And the first one is what typical bilingual and biliteracy development looks like. And for this activity, parents are given 5 descriptors, and Dee, you can go ahead and start clicking through that to show. So what parents get are cards with the descriptors that explain each of the 5 stages. And we ask them as a team to try to put those in order. Which of those descriptors would indicate the silent stage all the way up to advanced fluency. And then after that, they're more able to see where their child fits, and almost as importantly, what they can do to help their child in that journey. Because even though these 5 stages are going to appear for all language learners, how well and how quickly those develop are influenced by a lot of factors, one of which is keeping that home language alive, which again, we emphasize over and over again throughout our session.
Before we move on, I realized that I failed to mention that we really emphasized the teaching of these workshops in a bilingual format. And so the workshops that we're showing you the materials in English, but what we encourage the facilitators to do is have the slides, to have 2 different projectors with the slides up in English and the slides up in Spanish. And one evening they might have Spanish as the primary language, but there's handouts that are provided in English for the English speakers who aren't proficient in Spanish. And we try to have tables arranged so that there's at least one bilingual person at each table. But the idea is to get these parents interacting with one another, even if they're not proficient in each other's languages. And the facilitators really became very adept at managing this and teaching this in a very interesting and bilingual format without doing concurrent translation, which we were not supportive of.
The second activity from this session centered on social and academic language. And this I think is important for both English speaking families and Spanish or Hmong speaking families, because they see their kids speaking the partner language, 2nd, 3rd grade, and they sound perfectly fluent. For Spanish speaking families, they may be very fluent in their social language. English speaking families, they hear this chatter. They don't really know, but they think their kids sound perfectly fluent. But no matter how they sound in 2nd or 3rd grade, they do not have the academic language that they're going to need. And so this particular activity shows them the difference between what a child might be able to say and what they may end up reading in a textbook and have to make sense of. And so in this activity, parents are given the sentences on the right, and they have to match them up to the sentences on the left. And it is an eye-opener. And of course, the parents who are attending this workshop are being immersed in this whole area of academic language, because they are experiencing, especially our minority language parents, they're experiencing this academic language challenge that their children are going to have to meet. Our second goal for bilingualism and biliteracy is how they are developed in our DLI programs. And to demonstrate exactly what we mean by bilingualism and biliteracy, we start out with the dual language or the dual iceberg representation. And I don't know if you're familiar with that or not, but basically, it shows the features of language that are unique to a certain language, and those would appear above the surface of an iceberg. And then we have all of the features and the skills that are shared among languages. And so we ask parents to think about what this might look like for biliteracy as well. So our facilitators would have a picture book, and they would be introducing these various skills and strategies. For instance, using picture clues to understand a text. And we ask parents to think, now, is that only about reading in Spanish? Or does it matter if it's Spanish or English or Hmong or French or whatever the language? And parents begin to understand that look at how much their children are learning in Spanish or in Hmong. In Minnesota, we have Hmong programs as well. And so they don't have to worry that their kids are going to be so behind in English because they don't know how to rhyme in English, but they do know how to rhyme. And so this is both an informational presentation piece, but also we're reassuring parents that their kids really are acquiring a lot of literacy skills that will apply once they do meet up with their formal English classes and English instruction. And once again, I keep repeating now to you, and we keep repeating to parents how important it is for partner language families to continue to maintain their home language. And we share this graph. This is from sort of old right now, but I think the same thing would hold true today. Maybe it's even worse. But in this study, now some parents might have experienced this firsthand, but most families are surprised to see that according to this study, only 45% of first generation adults who came here to the United States under the age of 13 could still speak and read and write the language of their parents. That is really quite shocking. And that only 35% of second generation parents can do that, and 5% of third generation. And so it's in black and white or multicolor here, that without that concerted effort, which DLI helps support, that concerted effort to maintain and support and grow their home language, they are in real danger of losing their family language within 3 or 4 generations. So this is a very powerful visual and a very important piece of information to end our bilingualism session with. Our third topic is challenges of DLI. I understand the challenges that students will face on the pathway to bilingualism and how parents can support them. And the 4 big challenges that we chose are the power of English, the overwhelming power of English, not only in the United States, but throughout the world. The pressure of statewide testing, both on students and on programs. And then what happens when your child has learning difficulties and disabilities. And one of the big ones is, well, what can I do? I can't speak Spanish. Or for our Spanish speaking parents, how can I help my children with English? So we took these 4 challenges and really tried to get parents to think about how they're going to meet the challenges that are presented here. And I should add for that, we talked about the bumps in the road earlier. These challenges are full-blown roadblocks, and so they're much more detailed in the content that we deliver. And again, you can see for yourself what all is involved here when you get a chance. I hope you take the chance to look at the materials. And let's see. And then after our challenges, or some of the activities for our challenges, are some of the common myths about students learning in 2 languages and how to respond to them. And there's so much misunderstanding in both among the community of parents for DLI, but in the community at large, that parents are receiving a lot of incorrect information. And so we really want to show them, this is what you may be hearing, but this is the fact. And so one of the activities is Mythbuster, where all of the parents are giving a series of myths that they have to counteract. Some of the other ones are some scenarios in which these myths are played out, and we ask parents to think about those and to build up their knowledge about what are myths and what are facts. We have two very fun interactive activities. We did find, I was able to visit each of the 6 programs for at least one session, each of the pilot years. And I had developed these activities so that parents would be forced to get up and move around and talk to other people, and they didn't want to. And most of the facilitators didn't really want to enforce that. And so I made alternate instructions for doing this as a table activity. But I envision this much more as a get up, move around, talk, meet other people. So we had a missing words where parents had to find the match to their sentence. And what's the parent to do? One person would be the, one of the challenges, and the other person has to give advice. So there's a lot of interactive things going on here that really made this particular session, which can be pretty difficult, especially when you get into disabilities and learning difficulties, because we really didn't have the time to go into too much detail. But I think we did a pretty good job with these activities. So one of the myths, for instance, that they might have heard, I hear if a child in a DLI program has a learning disability, she would be better off switching to an English only program. Now, having taught in a one-way immersion program for 22 years, I know that I heard this at least once every year, if not multiple times. And so we give parents a moment to think about that and what might they say. And sometimes these myths have already been talked about within the session, so it's more of a review. For a few of them, it's new information. It's just another way of imparting information without our just getting up there and talking. So then we present the fact check. And by the end of this activity, parents have seen most of those, the most salient myths and misunderstandings that are floating around out there. And our fourth session, college and career opportunities. I understand that students can earn college credit in a variety of ways by demonstrating high levels of bilingualism and biliteracy. And we start this session with the map, and this is very interesting. We just updated this map, and I'm thinking we should have put the very first one also next to it that we started out with, because I think this is the 3rd generation map now, and we're seeing more and more states who have adopted some kind of seal of biliteracy. Here in Minnesota, it's the seal of bilingualism, but it's really quite impressive. And I think it's important that parents see they are part of a nationwide movement really to recognize bilingualism. And sometimes our schools, our teachers, our parent communities, we feel so isolated from the rest of the district, sort of the orphan kids. And we don't see the bigger picture, that even though within the district, we might be this small island, in the grand scheme of things, we really are part of an important nationwide effort to recognize bilingualism as a really special skill. Now, since these materials, as Dee said, are accessible to all of you, anybody who goes to the site, and they can be edited. So this is one example where if you are from a different state, you would have a different slide here to show what the seal means for your particular state, and you might have statistics of your own as well. But here's where we would show in Minnesota how students can receive credit for their Minnesota bilingual and multilingual seals. We also have the World Language Proficiency Certificate, which other states may not have. In addition to the seals, we also mention in this session other ways that our students can earn college credit while in high school, which would be for us, advanced placement courses. In Minnesota, we have what we call post-secondary education options, where students can take courses on college campuses. We have college in the schools, where college level courses are offered in the high school context. We also have international baccalaureate programs, and the highest level of the IB diploma awards college level credit as well. So all of these things are mentioned for our state, and other people would want to, make that represent their own context. Then we end up with our second goal, that there are many different jobs, careers, and other enriching opportunities open to those who are bilingual and biliterate. And here we have a chance to emphasize that for any career that families might envision for their children, we're really talking about a high degree of proficiency. And so we can see that almost all DLI students will attain the intermediate mid, and we show them what that means also. These are the ACTFL guidelines. They will mostly get to that level. Some will get to the advanced low, but then you look at what that means. So if they're at the advanced mid level, they're not going to be a lawyer with that. They're not going to be, some of the more high demanding careers. Here we have university professor, lawyer, even in the orange section there, physician, military linguist, medical interpreter. They have to get to a much higher level than what they're going to leave with. And so we encourage parents to think beyond K-12. Yes, it's important. It's important to stay through high school, but it's even more important if they truly envision a bilingual future for their children, to encourage the kids to look beyond high school, to find ways to use their language, to find ways to continue their study. If they're English language students, English language speakers, to pursue study abroad, to do whatever it takes to keep that language growing. Because simply enrolling in a DLI K-12 program really is not enough to have a truly full toolkit when it comes time to entering the professional world. And our final activity is a very fun Jeopardy game. And this is a review of all 4 sessions. And parents here now get a chance to see just how much they have learned, or at least that they were open to. They may not have fully processed it all, but they see just how much information they've learned in a couple weeks, and more importantly, that they have become engaged and must continue to be engaged in their child's DLI experience if it's going to be successful for both children and parents, because it can be very stressful for both parties. And so this is it's a great way to end the session. And then we have a big celebration. We encourage, if you're going to do something like this, we encourage you to make a big deal. We created certificates of achievement for having attended and participated in 4 weeks worth of education. We have a cake, and we really make a big deal out of it, because it's a big commitment, especially for our partner language families who may have 2 jobs and not always the childcare or the having to get over that reluctance even to try to do something like this. So it is. And I love this this quote that I will share with you, because it reminds me of why we're all here. We don't know exactly what the future holds, but integration of our global economy is not the only driving force for the need for higher level soft skills. Large global migration driven by both economic and political forces also has a large impact on workforce demands. To respond to both our current and future workforce needs, we have to redefine what an educated and talented workforce looks like. And the answer includes one that is multilingual and multicultural. And this is a great last thing for parents to hear, families to hear, that they really are making a difference for their children's future.
One of the things that we were very clear about wanting to do was to get feedback from parent and family participants in these workshops. So after each workshop, we had little surveys that we would have them fill out. This was very important for grant purposes, but it was also important for us in terms of revising the materials and getting them into their final form. Of course, these were translated into other languages as well so that parents could use them. And then in the last session as well, we had a more robust survey about the entire experience of the 4 workshops, again, for grant purposes mostly. And you can see here, I've given a little bit of information about what we were able to learn. In year 2, which was our first pilot year, we had 72 respondents, and about 87.5% rated the program as very effective or effective in increasing their knowledge and skills related to supporting their children's learning in the DLI program. In year 3, we had some data collection challenges, which is why we only had 32 participants here, but we had 100% of those participants rating it as very effective or effective. And in year 4, we had 38 participants, but then COVID happened. And so the vast majority of our districts were not able to offer the workshops in year 4. And we also had to suspend them for year 5, which was this past year. So they would have been offered in spring of 21, but we had to cancel them because of the COVID situation. But we were very encouraged by the positive ratings that we got from parents in the program. I'm going to go now, I'm going to stop sharing and then take you directly to the website just to provide you with a little bit of an understanding of the materials that you can review at your leisure. This is the main CARLA website. You go to Immersion Education and then scroll down and you'll come to the under resources, the Dual Language and Immersion Family Education website. And this website has a couple of different things. You can see here that it's translated in Spanish and Hmong as well. But we have both guidelines and materials for family education professionals. So this is where you'll be able to find all of the materials for the session that can be modified for your own contexts. And then we have useful resources for families. So let me first go to the guidelines and materials. You can see here we have some recommendations about how to use these materials. And then under the materials tab, got all of the materials for Spanish K-5, Spanish 612, and Hmong K-5. And so we have provided the actual PowerPoints so that people can download them and change them for their particular contexts. We've offered the handouts and scripts and activity sheets and parent surveys in both Word format and PDF. So it looks like there's a lot more here than there actually is. But at any rate, you have all of these materials here that you can use and modify for your own context. And then the other part of the website was to provide families with a place where they could go to learn more about each of the topics that are covered in the workshops. So Maureen spent countless hours finding great little video clips and readings and other things. And again, this is all translated. So if we were to go to the Hmong site, you can see that we have Hmong and English here. Again, all of the information that corresponds to the four contexts. Same with Spanish, and there are somewhat different materials. These are not just translations from what's available at the English English site. So it's just really a great opportunity for parents to learn more about these topics on their own time. And that's what we were really trying to accomplish with the website. We wanted to provide the materials for other people to use, and we wanted it to be a place where parents could go to learn more. And
I tried hard to find resources that are easy to understand. They're not highly academic research papers. These are video clips, YouTube, yeah. So a few things to purchase, a couple books, but really things that parents can understand.
I think we have time now for some questions. And like I mentioned earlier, Tara Fortune and I are currently working with Anchorage School District to modify these materials for Indigenous language revitalization programs. So they will probably be available through the ASD, the Anchorage School District website, but hopefully they'll allow us to also post them at this site so that we can expand this site even further beyond the Spanish and the Hmong. We'll also have Indigenous revitalization immersion. Of course, those materials will only be provided in English because the goal is really to create materials that are going to be useful for a range of Indigenous programs, not specifically one particular language.
So thank you so much for this presentation. You have been getting lots of really positive feedback in the chat, and it looks like, as you probably already know, the resources that you have created are filling a really important need for folks who are getting ready to start DLI programs or who may already have DLI programs in place. So thank you for sharing all of this. One question that came up in the chat was whether or not you have plans to support additional languages in the materials that you've created, that is additional translation. Somebody asked about Mandarin, but maybe other languages where children are coming from homes where the language is their home language, a language other than English is their home language.
No, that's the short answer. And the reason is because we don't have the grant funding to do it. We had the grant funding to support this, and most of our Chinese programs, well, all of our Chinese programs in Minnesota anyway, are one way. They're not two-way programs, and so they wouldn't be supported with this grant funding. So we're just hoping that districts that choose to use these materials will find translators of their own, because that's what it will take for you to be able to put this into other languages.
Well, and I think the adaptability that you've worked into the materials makes that so much easier for folks rather than having static documents that can't be changed. So I'm sure that will be appreciated. I see that Sarah Anthony has their hand up. Sarah, you can't unmute yourself, so we'll have to ask Marlene to do that for you.
Thank you. Great presentation and great resources. I just had a question about one of the graphs that you showed, that Maureen showed us. It was talking about how I think DLI students will have a tendency to also excel in the long run in English. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if they explain the results. Like, why is it that dual language immersion students, if they continue with the program, why is it that in the end they also have a good performance in English? I was just curious.
Yeah, it's really about developing that home language, because mm-hmm. language acquisition and cognitive development go hand in hand. And when you take a child who has been engaging with parents and family members and community in a language other than English until they're 5 years old, and then they go to school and everything is in English, that development has been interrupted. Okay. And so when you take a child who has those kinds of experiences in Spanish and they get to go to a school where they get to learn in Spanish while they're acquiring English, that process for them is not interrupted. They don't have the interruption of the cognitive development or the language acquisition. And so what we know from decades of research is the stronger the native language and the stronger the literacy that you have in that home language, the better you will learn English in the long run.
Thank you.
Because those skills are transferred, right? They're transferred to other languages. And you know, so it's not surprising. Sometimes we get an ESL student, an English learner that comes to us in grade 11, but they've been schooled all the way through in their home language, and they're highly literate in their home language, and they have a relatively easy time acquiring English and English literacy. It's much more challenging for refugee students, for example, Somali students who come to us in grade 9, and they've never had formal schooling in any language. It's much more challenging to work with students like that. So that development of the home language, development of literacy in the home language is absolutely critical for acquisition of English and getting to high levels of academic achievement in English.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So we have a logistical question in the chat from Emily, who asks about the timeline for implementing these workshops, what you recommend. Do they take place once every week for a month? Are they spaced out for a longer period of time? Do you start right away at the beginning of the academic year? What is some advice you can give for implementing this?
Maureen, why don't you talk about that?
I think in the beginning, we always had in mind it would be weekly for 4 weeks, asking parents, especially busy parents, to commit to a wider range of time. Just, we didn't think that was appropriate. But right away, several schools decided to do twice a week and finish it off in 2 weeks. And that seemed to be helpful. There, Risen Christ, the Catholic school that Dee mentioned, they actually did one session early in the morning and another session in the evening, trying to capture parents whenever they could come. So it really is up to whatever fits your community. But we do recommend, limiting the scope. That way you have a greater chance of making sure that parents attend all 4 sessions, because we really want them there for every single one of those 4 sessions. which
Yeah,
is why we make such a big deal out of it when they do commit to that.
Right. I think that the very first year that we piloted it, one of the districts really spaced out the workshops. I think they had one like every 3 weeks or something like that. And they had quite a bit of attrition. And so that we were really then, recommending that they make them in a shorter period of time. And St. Paul Public Schools is the one that went to the 2 times. They did like a Tuesday, Thursday for 2 weeks, and that worked very well for them.
And as for when, some of the Minneapolis, for instance, or maybe it was St. Paul, offered them both in the spring and the winter.
Yeah, that was St. Paul.
Fall and spring, I forget exactly. And that also, as many as, however you can get those bodies there, that's the goal, to get as many parents as you can.
So we're coming up on the top of the hour, but we do have one more question in the chat that I think could probably be answered quickly. And that is, do you have, or perhaps do you know of, similar resources focused on raising awareness with educators and policymakers who might be unconvinced about DLI?
I'm not aware of any resources, but these resources could easily be modified for that audience. You would obviously probably create one session by pulling from several, but I think that that's something that could, certainly could be developed. I'm not aware of any materials. I'm aware of, they have institutes for administrators and things like that, but they tend to be individuals who already are working in a DLI setting. But yeah, I'm not aware of any materials that are available online for that audience.
Okay. I did see a question about how to get to the educational materials again. The last slide on the fourth presentation has a link both for the CARLA website and has the direct link that will take you to the page that Dee showed with the teacher resources and parent resources.
Yeah, I don't think people have access to the PowerPoint, but Karen did post the direct link in the chat box.
Yeah, and we'll be posting the recording of this webinar on the CARLA website within a week or two, and you'll be able to see the slides there that will also have the links. But the link just got put into the chat again by both Marlene and Karen, who are always on top of things. So you should be all set there. You just click on that link and it will take you both to the Immersion Parent Info page and to our recordings page, where you'll find this presentation in the coming weeks. So I want to take a moment to thank all of you for coming today. For most of the presentation, there were over 80 people in this presentation. So clearly this was a topic of enormous interest. And we're so grateful that you chose an hour of your time to spend with CARLA. And we especially want to thank Diane and Maureen for the time that they have put into this incredibly useful project that people are so enthusiastic about, and for coming today to share that with us. So thanks to both of you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Have a great day, everybody.